It's August 22nd, 2023. I'm keeping an eye on the television for words of wisdom, I suppose. I was thinking this morning about climate change and global warming, and I'm like, who do humans really think is going to solve this crisis? So, and like what could be like the main cause of it? So anyhow, so I'm thinking of this was the Star Force or Star Crew or anything related to like space that I can find in the local library. So I checked out the juvenile book and who was named. Um, then I'm looking at things like really like smart scholar academics. And then I'm thinking of this pattern here for energy forces within a system of like, let's say, interplanetary science, possibly. And then they have on this thing they call the magic of physics, which leads me to these energy ball potentials that I don't necessarily have academic words for, because it amazes me that even though I'm this flower with this very special clock system and I have very specific educational needs in order to contribute to like the intelligent community, some power somewhere between a 718 area code and a 516 area code between local, regional, and long distance, and then international carriers. There's, I guess, some form of internal struggle or fight. Best I can, I mean, that's speculation, but I have no idea why I've been kept in harm's way rather than including me in how they like to be spoken to, what their language of expertise is. So this way I can contribute in order to help global warming and into the safe Goldilocks zone rather than being, and I'm like, now how in like physics, so I'm looking at it and she poses this thing like, I didn't even have this level of education in science in the series of rooms that I was presented in. The closest thing I had was a lesson once with a clay boat, and then it was water displacement theory with putting tiles on this boat inside of this block. That was Mrs. Metz METZ class, second grade. That was the closest I got to like this level of education.
You got it. It still stays there, and you can bring it back. And you know what? You can do more than one.
So my point is that if one of these magic balls loses contact or is pushed or forced into the wrong direction in life force of whatever this is in interplanetary science, at like hard to explain because the theories are built around the problems and then their solutions. So whatever this represents in whatever the symbols are, since no scientists are here helping me along the way, and in fact I've been held almost like at a whipping post, it feels like. So then I'm going and I'm looking to see what the defense industry and in the general public, and they're talking about UFOs and disinformation, fake news, all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to go to that and their publications with their persons. This is CBS Mornings, and this was E163. It came out on Wednesday, but this at least showed that there's some form of a force and then that holds these in some magical position, but at some point they do break contact and then it's whatever. So that seemed really important, as does this Dr. Stephen Greer, who was a trauma doctor. So I'm going to pause this for a second. But my whole thing is that in my local national security area of Queens, there's this thing in anatomy and physiology where you have healthy cells that then make up tissue that then make up muscle so that you have flex. Inside of Queens, it seems that my cells, my tissue, and my muscle has been disrupted, and the flex has been an issue, has been a problem in disruption in service at Hamlet or Manor. All right, so this is them talking about, like, there are smart people out in the world. I just don't know any of them, and I don't know how or who or how to put anything together because of the most disingenuous, like, how I've been held, almost like in captivity, I suppose you could say. It's a series of rooms with 8-foot ceilings, and I don't have access. I don't even have the words to build. There was no guidance to build myself into a career that I needed, a special flower with special seed in this E=mc² energy potential that I had, with synchronicitous clocks, not anything in any irregularity.
And in this document, it says point blank that the people who are on this committee are answering
And
and
it
working
says
with the CIA,
CIA.
but that can't be disclosed. And these are esteemed scientists in academic university settings. It says point blank, when there's a very strong piece of evidence, we need to set up something so we release a certain type of balloons and film it so that it will look.
Now, as far as flying saucers go, is that like a code word at academics for whatever these are inside of the interplanetary science of like how reactions work inside of this based on these very special clocks and timing and calibration and so on and so forth of these like theoretical shells that come in almost as like a shield, and then that if that was off, that would tend to cause friction potentially. So there's like a whole lot of different things, but again, I don't know how to who to have the right conversation with. They're saying that this is covered by CIA, but I don't know who they are. Like, where do you find them? Last time I went and I was having an issue and I asked for one, they put me in a hospital and gave me some mental diagnosis to keep me quiet. So why do any of them even exist then? If the real people who have the real evidence to try to help combat global warming and climate change are being held in some fashion that, like, I mean, it's a different part of the hive mechanics.
Like that to sort of debunk it. And we need to engage astronomers and amateur astronomers and set up a sighting situation where we show them some evidence and then show them how it's debunked.
Fast forward to 1968. The Condon Committee was formed, led by Dr. Edward Condon.
Without this television, I would not know any of these names. Like, this broadcast is the only thing that even gives me word construct to know that humans are actually out there and they're actually doing this. Because when I walk out on the streets, all I see are a bunch of bodies that are busy, that are non familial. They're somebody else's potential civil service and like National Guard. I don't even see my own National Guardsmen. I don't see that many of them, at disruption in cellular service. And it's, if without this, I would think that there was no life on this planet that existed any longer. Because when I walk out my front door, it's very sparse.
A professor of physics at the University of Colorado.
Now, ostensibly, this was an objective scientist who was heading up a committee to tell the truth, because I'm a scientist. These guys are scientists second, they're humans first. And it says it cannot be allowed to be known that Dr. Condon et al. Are actually working with the CIA for these psychological warfare and spin factors.
I concluded that this was not an objective study. So I wrote a letter to Condon, and he was so furious at that he called up James S. McDonald, who was at that time the chairman of the newly merged Douglas and McDonnell aircraft companies, and tried to get me fired.
This is in these documents. This is not a theoretical case. This is why I say you form a committee when you want to kill something.
I must admit that any favorable mention of the flying
I had no idea that the problem that exists beyond in this door of McDonald into Tiafrio had anything to do with Douglas. But again, these are just like more signs and symptoms of the queer 75 and the problem with the donkey in 76.
saucers by a scientist amounts to extreme heresy and places the one making the statement in danger of excommunication by the scientific theocracy. Frank B. Salisbury, PhD.
Well, that's really frightening because if there's a scientific theology or theocracy and they're not allowing me, even though I have this very special clock feature and I know that like Providential knows that these things existed, they had big anger about it before I arrived. Like, who do you all think you are, kind of a thing. Right, but there is purpose in this. So, but to keep me out of the scientific community and to purposely like just push me aside, these are like layers of failure. And then these are people with big egos, big power trips that can cause big problems. And it just gets worse. It doesn't lead to any, it only gives advantage to the wrong thing. It leaves room for like disruption in service and disintegritus, and destroying the integrity of what was and what exists somewhere. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. It's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.